and what we're going to be doing today. So this is a session called Protecting Immigrant and Undocumented Students. As Laurel mentioned, we are recording, so feel free to share that recording after today's session with colleagues that perhaps weren't able to attend. Laurel, can we move to the next slide?
Of course.
So I will give a welcome and an introduction. Next, we'll hear from Gregory Chen, who's the Director of Advocacy in the American Immigration Lawyers Association. He's going to be presenting on new policy developments in immigration and higher education. We're going to have a short question and answer with Greg because he does need to jump off the call and attend to other business that's developing. Then we're going to hear from Nancy Jodadis. She's the Director of Higher Education Initiatives for Educators for Fair Consideration. And we'll provide you copies of these websites of these organizations at the end of the webinar. She's going to be speaking about state-level challenges and opportunities in higher education. And next we'll hear from Kristen Yaris, University of Oregon. She's an anthropologist, and Whitney Duncan, also an anthropologist and assistant professor at University of Northern Colorado. They are two founding members of the Anthropologist Action Network as well. And we'll conclude with a question and answer. If you do have questions as they come up, feel free to include them in the chat box, and we will be monitoring that and facilitate a discussion at the end. Have the next slide, please, Laurel. So the Anthropologist Action Network for Immigrants and Refugees really came out of kind of an immediate response following the Trump election. And it was an email to several anthropologists. There were about 6 or 7 of us on the email discussing about what we were doing in response to the election, how we were protecting our students, how it was impacting the communities with whom we work as researchers on migration and immigration. That led to pretty quickly a private Facebook group called Protecting Undocumented Students. That went from about 6 or 7 of us to now just under 2,000. And these are faculty, higher education administrators, allies, people that are concerned about undocumented students and their families. It's a place in which we share resources. It's a place in which we share news, ask questions. There are folks in K through 12 as well as community college and higher ed. So we do invite you, we'll again provide you that link at the end, but we do invite you to join that group. It's really a rich resource for sharing information. Simultaneously, it led to the emergence of a 2016 American Anthropological emerging session in which we gathered academics and anthropologists to discuss in person what was going on their campuses, initiatives they had made around sanctuary campuses, curricular information, community level work, how this is impacting our research and representation, which then kind of evolved into a Google group. And again, we invite you to join this Google group, particularly geared towards anthropologists, but it's a place in which we are, again, sharing information in a more private setting. We do have a Google archive with some sample syllabi, some resources, some op-eds. And so really the mission of the Anthropologist Action Network is to organize efforts and disseminate information on how faculty and higher ed administration can protect differently documented students and their families. And we want to accentuate and their families, right? It's not just about our students, but also the obligations, the demands, their family units in the communities that we work. So I'm going to turn the slide over, or the presenter role over to Greg, who's going to speak a little bit about emerging developments. So Greg, it's all yours.
Thank you. This is Greg Chen with the American Immigration Lawyers Association. I'm really pleased to be part of this presentation and to give a quick overview of what AILA, the American Immigration Lawyers Association, is. We are the private bar association of immigration lawyers here in the United States. We have 38 chapters, of which 3 are international, and the rest are in the domestic region of the United States. We have, of our 14,000 members, it's mostly practicing lawyers. We have some law professors as well that are in our association. And basically, we are engaged in just about every aspect of immigration law. And this particular topic of not only the educational space, but generally the issue of sanctuary is something that is very important to the American Immigration Lawyers Association, but I'll talk about that more. So first, I'm going to just address kind of what is happening in terms of updates on immigration policy. Second, I will talk about the concept of welcoming or sanctuary that has come up quite a bit politically, especially post-election, and then focus a little bit more on what campuses of higher education can do, realizing that some of you will also be addressing that. I am going to give more of an overview and let others fill in some of the details where you have more expertise than I do. So the first topic in terms of an overview of what is happening on immigration. So I think the important themes here to recognize is that in just the past 6 or so weeks of the new administration, we have already seen 4 executive orders that have been issued by President Trump on immigration. The first 2 were issued on January 25th regarding border and interior enforcement. The third one was issued on January 27th. That was the travel ban that banned Muslims and refugees. That was already revoked as of March 6th when the president reissued a new travel ban on Muslims and refugees after the courts had prevented him from implementing his first travel ban. So already he has issued quite a bit of policy in the immigration space. I think the big picture here for all of you, just to recognize if it's not already clear from the front pages, is that enforcement of immigration law is going to be happening at a dramatically increased scale, not only at airports and ports of entry, but in border regions, as well as in the interior. Some important themes to think about with respect to those of you who are educators and administrators of institutions of higher education. The population that's going to be impacted by this will be more extensive and much broader than under previous administrations. And I don't just mean President Obama, I also mean under President Bush and before. Significantly and strikingly, under Trump's executive orders, there are no longer going to be really any meaningful priorities for who is subject to enforcement. And in Trump's executive order on interior enforcement, he did set forth the categories of population that he's going to target, but the list is so long and so expansive that essentially anybody who is subject to removal under immigration law, meaning to be deported, could be a target for enforcement. This means people who have been living in the United States for a long time, who have family here, who have jobs, could be subject to enforcement. And it also means that people who have received, let's say, a grant of deferred action under the president's DACA initiative could also be picked up and wouldn't necessarily have any kind of special protection. And I think that could be particularly salient for your population. And of course, there are going to be many students in both the K through 12 and the higher ed environment that don't have any legal status whatsoever. And I think, I'm guessing that's a population that's of great concern for all of you. Another important point to mention is that President Trump has not indicated any kind of specific policy yet regarding President Obama's DACA initiative. I'm assuming you all know what that is, so I won't go into too much detail. The Trump administration or President Trump has signaled and said some words about DACA without any real detail, but he's indicated that he cares about the DACA population, that they're a sympathetic group. He says he loves them just like his own grandkids, but he hasn't really indicated what he'll do about it or about that specific initiative. There was a leaked memo that came out in late January that hasn't been finalized, but that leaked version indicated that the president was going to rescind the DACA initiative itself, but not necessarily take any specific action against the people who have been granted DACA. So at this point, it's still a question mark. The final thing I'll say with respect to where immigration enforcement or immigration policy is headed is that we expect tomorrow, March 16th, for the president to make a request for additional funding to Congress for Department of Homeland Security activities, including funding part of the wall, funding more agents for enforcement, and also an expansion of the use of detention. And this just kind of highlights the overall plan to really begin implementation of what will probably be an unprecedented scale-up of deportation activities and a machinery to make that effective, more than has ever been done before. So that's a quick summary of what I anticipate will happen. I'm happy to take questions later about that. Secondly, the concept of sanctuary. And let me just be clear that this term is one that is used quite a bit in the media, and it doesn't have a specific clear definition in law, nor do I think there is clear agreement within the media or policymakers when they use the term sanctuary. The term does have historic background, rising primarily during the 1980s when churches began using the term sanctuary to mean a space that was going to provide actual sanctuary for people who were at risk of being deported. But how the president uses it now and how it's used in policy,
do a conference ID. It says
in policy context. Could you mute yourself if you're not speaking, please? Is that it's not clear yet what the term sanctuary means, and a couple of things that I'll just flag. First of all, I think sometimes when people use the term sanctuary, it is understood to mean that you are using your city or locality or perhaps your campus to shield people who are subject to enforcement from actual enforcement. And I think it's very important to be careful about thinking about any environment like a campus being able to prevent any kind of enforcement from happening. There are steps that can be taken that I'll talk about in a moment, but I think it's dangerous to think of a city that would not allow, let's say, ICE or Customs and Border Protection from being able to step onto their public grounds. That's not going to be something that can be done. There are steps that can be taken to make sure there are policies around the sharing of information, first of all, and around the kind of collaboration that a locality might engage in for the purpose of enforcement. Many localities have indicated that they do not want to be actively collaborating with immigration enforcement because it is not their primary responsibility, and they want to maintain trust with local communities so that they are not going to lose that trust for the purpose of providing public safety and protection for the broader community. For campuses, I think an important distinction would be to think about whether you are thinking of your campus as a sanctuary campus or as a welcoming environment that celebrates diversity. For functional purposes, I think it's important to recognize that being a welcoming environment where you are going to tolerate and celebrate students no matter what background, faith, immigration status, I think is an important concept that I would recommend all campuses really explore. Whether you take on the mantle or the term sanctuary campus, I think it requires, a little bit more thought. Some campuses have done that just for the purpose of making a broader statement, but I think it's important to think about what that really means. What can campuses actually do? Well, already I mentioned the idea of creating a supportive environment, a welcoming environment as a welcome campus, and I think that would be something certainly worth exploring. But I think the next step is to really look carefully at what the policies are at your particular educational environment, and to provide administrators and students with clear policies about what the actual environment is going to be, and to publish those policies on immigration enforcement, sharing of information, and collaboration with immigration authorities. One important sphere here is the environment of limiting collaboration with immigration customs enforcement. The specific areas here to think about, one is that can a campus actually prevent ICE from coming onto the campus to engage in enforcement? And the dividing line here is really with respect to what spaces on a campus are considered private space versus public space. And that's something that each campus and your legal counsel will need to go through. But if a space is considered a public space, the federal enforcement authorities are going to have greater latitude to come into that space and to speak with students, speak with administrators about, and ask questions perhaps about their status. But if it's considered a private space, let's say a classroom or let's say a dormitory, then ICE is probably going to need an actual judicially issued warrant before they can begin asking questions and entering that space. So that issue of the warrant requirement and whether space is public or private is something worth looking into carefully. Secondly, ICE has a standing policy that the actual language of the current policy was issued in 2011, but the concept of sensitive locations has been in existence before Obama, before Bush, and the concept is that ICE will not go into places of worship, into school environments, and to health hospitals and other places that deliver health care, because those are sensitive locations and it would not be wise for other policy reasons for ICE to actively target enforcement in those spaces. So university, higher ed environments are part of that policy currently. It has not yet been revoked. We are concerned that it could be under the current administration, but it stands in effect now and it remains up on the Immigration Customs Enforcement website. And generally the policy is that ICE will not be going onto campuses to do enforcement or to target that enforcement. It doesn't mean that they will never come on campus, and there could be situations when they would have, let's say, a warrant, or if there's exigent circumstances that might justify it. But that is something worth looking at, the sensitive locations policy. The last thing I'll just mention is that campus police are often operating and provide important public safety functions on campuses. Typically, campus police are not going to be collaborating with federal enforcement authorities on immigration, but it's possible that campus police could enter into an agreement to collaborate with the federal immigration enforcement authorities. These are typically considered 287G agreements, and I'm citing their 287G is the particular provision of the Immigration Nationality Act that authorizes those kinds of collaborations. And if such an agreement were entered into by the campus police, there could be a role where campus police would actually participate more in those kinds of activities. I would recommend that campuses look carefully at those policies, and if there isn't one in place yet, to resist or refuse to enter into any such collaboration. The second major issue that I want to go into in terms of is the information sharing aspect of what campuses may want to look at. And the broad point here is that higher education environments and campuses should look at and really have your legal counsel clarify what are the laws that require sharing of information with the federal immigration enforcement authorities about your students, about their personal information regarding their immigration status, and regarding perhaps where they are currently residing, where their residence is on campus, for example. There are two primary laws that are at issue here. One is FERPA, and the other is SEVIS. FERPA stands for the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. In quick summary, FERPA essentially restricts schools from releasing immigration status information about their students unless you're required to by a judicial order or by subpoena. And so that does provide some realm of protection, but it's not sacrosanct. There are exceptions to it, and it's worth looking into the implications of FERPA for your campus. The other one is, I mentioned SEVIS. There is a program for student exchange and visitors coming from abroad. These are typically exchange visitors or non-immigrant students that might be on J category or F category or M category visas. The bottom line here is that under the Student Exchange Visitor Program, there is a database called SEVIS, which creates a mechanism for sharing information and essentially requires universities that are participating in this program to update and provide information about the students, where they live on campus, and other identifying information to that database, which federal immigration agencies can also access. So that's going to be a more porous environment of database sharing where students that are on those particular visas, their information is going to be more available to the federal government. So I haven't given the details here, but I'm just trying to make sure that you're aware that information sharing policies is going to be an important realm for a higher ed environment to really look at before you establish any policies on that. The last couple of things I'm going to mention here in terms of what campuses can do, what are first one, to educate your students about your policies and what practices your administrators are going to engage in so that it's open and transparent, so that students can understand what actions an administrator might do on campus, what the campus police might do, and what you might do if Immigration Customs Enforcement comes on campus. Related to that is to provide information that I often refer, or lawyers refer to as know your rights information, to students specifically, so that they know what they should do if they are questioned about their immigration status by an administrator, by campus police, or by federal agents if they come on campus. Are students required to answer questions? Can they walk away? And the basic information on Fourth Amendment law and Fifth Amendment law is that unless you are being apprehended or there's probable cause to hold you, somebody can walk away from being asked questions. But you should provide that information. AILA's got some up on our website at aila.org, or you can email me, we can send it to you. The university should also provide information about what constitutes a public space. What happens if ICE comes and knocks at somebody's dorm room or comes into a classroom? What are students' rights in that environment? The other thing I will mention is if your campus is going to be publishing policies about what you plan to do, or is going to make a statement about being a welcoming campus or a sanctuary campus, it's worth communicating with other educators to understand what they are planning to do. There have been many statements where educators have joined together to make joint statements. I'm aware of one in particular that was done by the Pomona College president that I believe has likely over 600 or 700 educators that have signed on. These are campuses across the country. So that is just one example, but it was a very broad statement. And that is a way to make sure that students across the country understand what their rights are collectively and what administrators are doing to make sure education environments are a safe place. Also, and the last thing I'll mention is that your campus may want to consider creating legal assistance programs for the students on campus. I'm aware of several universities that have already done that, where they've actually hired attorneys to provide legal clinics on campus so that students who are concerned about these kinds of questions can go on campus and receive some basic information, if not a more detailed consultation. So I know the UC system in California, I know Harvard has done this, and I'm sure there are several others that I'm not aware of that have set up these kinds of programs. They found those to be incredibly beneficial to ensuring their students understand their rights with respect to immigration. I'm going to stop there, and the last thing I'll just say is AILA's happy to be a resource. My email is gchen, that's first initial last name, at aila.org. Our website is www.aila.org, and we have lots of resources up on our webpage. Thank you, and I'm going to turn it back over to the moderator. I believe that's Laurel, to see if there's any questions.
Great, thanks, Greg. That was awesome. So we have one question from Lauren. She's asking about working on a large public university, which she presumes is considered a public space since it belongs to the state. And she's asking what sort of private space would exist at such a public institution.
So thank you, Lauren, for that question. I don't know all the details of the law regarding that division of what's going to be private or public space on a public university. This is Greg speculating mostly here, but your open quad spaces, any place where somebody can just walk through openly without requiring ID or a security password or something like that, I think would certainly be public. I would think dormitories would be a space that might be more protected. I can't say absolutely whether it is considered private. Let's say ICE wants to enter the dorm but isn't in somebody's dorm room. There might be a distinction there where they could walk into a dormitory's public lobby, but they might not be able to roam the halls without getting a warrant. Same thing with classrooms. or a classroom building. Maybe they can walk into the building, but they can't get into classroom spaces. I think those are all you will really need to work with legal counsel at the university. I think it's important for administrators to really get a legal opinion and make sure there's a clear standing policy that is then published for students to be aware of.
Awesome. And if I could have all the attendees who just joined mute their mic. I know we're getting a little bit of feedback, and these are really interesting questions that we want awesome answers to. So we have one more question from Whitney. She's asking if on a public space that doesn't FERPA prevent admin, staff, faculty from sharing information about particular students?
So I'm not sure, Kristen, what you mean by the intersection of FERPA with the private and public space. And this might just be the extent of I am not an expert on FERPA. Generally, FERPA is going to pertain to the release of information. So if ICE were to show up on campus and go to the registrar or go to a dorm and say, we want the information about Jane Doe, who we would like to understand what their status is, or if they say we would like all the information about everybody who comes from the country of Iran on your registry right now, and they go to, let's say, the registrar for that information, FERPA would govern that environment. But with respect to the public versus private space, I'm not sure FERPA would come in as much, but I'm not an expert exactly on the bounds of FERPA. I don't know if it addresses actual physical geography on campus in terms of its protections. I hope that helps.
And we have somewhat of a follow-up question from Aaron, who's asking, in what situations would a public school, such as a K-12, would ICE be able to access information from the free or reduced lunch list and other student data that is typically protected by FERPA?
So I would defer to FERPA. I think FERPA is the main area of protection there. I think in addition to FERPA, which does provide some protection about student roles, the real relevant question is the immigration status. Most schools do not gather information about immigration status at the K through 12 level. And I think it would be worth checking with a particular public school setting to see if they are gathering that information that is typically not gathered by public schools. The other thing I would mention is that the constitutionality of there is a constitutional right that was established in the Supreme Court case of Plyler versus Doe, where under the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause, the Supreme Court determined that students who are undocumented have a right to attend public school, at least in the K-12 environment.
I don't know how the
so if ICE were to start pushing public schools for that information in a way that violated that right, I think there would be certainly grounds to challenge ICE exploring that information. Now, if there's a public school that is trying to could I ask you to mute your line if you are speaking?
Rashad?
Because we can hear you interfering with the conference.
Breakdown.
So under that particular Supreme Court statute, Plyler versus Doe, I think it is important just to recognize that there could be a public school that would want to collude with Immigration Customs Enforcement, provide that information.
I would give you the folder.
At that school, I think it's important.
I'm guessing some of the charges.
Your parents at the local community level should be asking, finding out what the school's policies are if they are concerned. And of course, the sensitive location policy still does stand in effect under the 2011 policy. As long as it remains in effect, ICE should not be going on to campuses. Laurel, are there more questions?
Thanks. Sorry, I just had to go on mute a colleague's mic.
Laurel, is AILA, in addition to having the information I mentioned a moment ago, we have summarized and provided a lot of analytic material about the current immigration policies of the administration. That's really our forte. And if you go to our web page, we have a specific page that's labeled Featured Issues 2017 Immigration under the new Congress and the new President. And that will provide detailed information about what is happening. We update that regularly. So as you need that information, feel free to come to our website, and we hope we can be helpful.
Perfect. So it looks like there's no more questions right now. I know, Greg, we have you on the line for about another 5 minutes or so. So if anybody has any questions, now would be the time to include them in that chat box. And if I could also ask for everyone to mute their mic. I know we're getting a lot of feedback during that last Q&A round, and it's really helpful if we're able to clearly hear everyone. If you're having any trouble, you don't know how to mute your mic, just give me a shout out in the chat box, and I can guide you through that. Okay, so we have one more question, Greg, from Regina. Do you recommend using language around Fourth Amendment rather than sanctuary for campuses?
So yeah, thank you for that question. I think it depends when you're saying, do I recommend using language around Fourth Amendment versus sanctuary? If you're talking about broad messaging, if a campus is going to issue a statement of its policy meant for not only its students but for the public, I think the question is, what goal is the administration trying to achieve by issuing that? I think the term sanctuary, as I was trying to explain before, is an ambiguous term that also has it's politically loaded. I think nowadays in the United States, if you were to label a locality, meaning a city or a county, or a campus as a sanctuary campus, you need to recognize that there's a political connotation to that you are trying to shield students from enforcement on immigration purposes, and that might be imputed even if you do not intend it. That doesn't mean a campus shouldn't do that. I think there are a lot of campuses that have indicated that they want to make sure it's clear that they are going to be a protective environment for students of all backgrounds, including those who might be undocumented. So I think it's just important to recognize what that term is going to mean in the broader context politically. And I think that's important here. In addition, on the Fourth Amendment, if you want to message publicly about Fourth Amendment, recognize that that's a technical term that references the Constitution. If you want to explain that your campus is going to be a constitutionally protected or constitutionally safe environment, that could be a way of speaking about this that maybe Americans will understand as making sure that you're upholding the protections of the Constitution. And and using that term, something like a constitutional environment or a constitutionally protected environment could be something to think about. I'm not sure if that's exactly what you meant in terms of external environment. Feel free to follow up if you want another question on that.
Thanks so much, Greg. We're gonna, in consideration of time, we should move on to Nancy. But thanks so much for your contributions. It was really informative.
Happy to.
All right, so Nancy, if you are ready, I'm going to pass the presenter role on to you. And that way we can see your screen. Just give me 1 second. All right, Nancy, you should see a little dialog box. Perfect.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nancy Chaditis, and I work with Educators for Fair Consideration. I am the Director of Higher Education Initiatives, and we are an organization whose mission is to Our mission is to empower undocumented young people to achieve educational and career goals. And we do this through institutional and policy transformation, an organization that is located in San Francisco, but work within California and also work nationally with different partners to try to achieve these goals. Our work began really on a personal level in terms of trying to provide scholarships and more financial support and empowerment to undocumented students, but through our work over the past years, realized that we really have an institutional and policy work that needs to be done as well, so that when students have their rights, are aware of their rights, schools are actually able to enforce them and receive them more. We believe the problem that really must be resolved is that undocumented young people are confronting so many inequities and fears that are based on imposed on political and legal and educational systems that really are constraining their educational success and limiting their career opportunities. And post-election, of course, a much more hostile environment and a rise in individual discrimination and hate crimes. Can everybody see my slides?
Yes. Nancy, I'm going to interrupt real quickly. We are getting a lot of typing noises, so if you are not speaking, please mute your mic. We're picking up a lot of background noise.
And can you confirm that my slides are on view?
We are seeing you loud and clear.
Great. Okay. So some of the common challenges for those, many of you are already working with undocumented students, and this will have resonance for those of you that are just beginning the work, really understanding the need of secrecy versus the need for support. The level of fear has just gone up so tremendously with these complex immigration concerns and the way that students are under attack for their immigration status. And so we're very concerned about how to confront these challenges and better support students and their families and communities, because many are often working to help pay for school as well as help families, but also are facing legal constraints for work. And so what we are really working on is trying to address some of these issues and the inability to be able to receive federal financial aid in California and state financial aid across the nation. There's only 6 states that allow students to receive state financial aid. But we also believe there's really a lack of institutional awareness and support. And so we're really excited to be participating today with your network to see how we can broaden the work that we do across campuses. And I believe that really knowing current legislation can help you support undocumented students. Greg gave a great overview of the work of some of the executive orders and some of the sanctuary information as well, and I'm going to touch on that, mostly specifically on the executive order that talks about interior enforcement, because as Greg noted, this really replaces existing immigrant enforcement priorities with new significantly broader priorities, which basically states that almost anybody could be considered a criminal and therefore given potential priority for deportation. And the other part that's really of note is that it would prohibit any kind of federal grant. It would prohibit any kind of federal grants to localities that the Department of Homeland Security and the Attorney General deem a sanctuary jurisdiction. Now, at the same time, others such as Greg or those from the ACLU, and well, I can't speak for Greg, but those that we've spoken to from the ACLU, from the National Immigration Lawyer Centers and the Immigration Law Center, are stating that there are many legal battles that would have to be faced prior to this taking place. And you've seen that there's probably also some states and cities that are also coming forward to try to proactively fight this legislation that is, or fight this executive order, but it is on campus. I mean, it is on record. Also recognizing that there are many immigration raise and response networks, hoping that you guys are able to connect with some of those in the areas where you are, to be able to, because they're working to educate community members, initiate a rapid response to the raids that are taking place, and assess the context of raids. I think this is really important, especially because with the students that I've seen, as well as the students that we've worked with who have been detained, when there is a strong response, and in certain occasions they have been able to create releases for students or family members when there is an immediate and strong response. So that's really important for us to consider. And also, as Greg was indicating, really important also that students know their rights and that family members and community members know their rights. United Dream.
Nancy, we've lost you.
So that we can post these in our schools and bring this out in our classrooms, let people know that they should not open their door without a signed warrant, that they should remain silent and not say anything because it could be used against them, and that they do have the legal right, as Greg was indicating, and also making sure that they do not sign anything, because spoken to individuals who have indicated that they did sign something stating that would make the situation go away, and unfortunately ended up signing their voluntary deportation order. So I think that this is people knowing that they have rights no matter who is president is really important, and then we as educators, we who are in universities, have a strong role we can play within this area. In terms of the deferred action for childhood arrivals, more than 750,000 DACA recipients are in the United States, and President Trump did say throughout his election that he planned to put off on the first day. And I think the idea that he's made these new statements, that he has not taken specific action to close the DACA program, is again a testament to the huge number of universities, employers, and individuals who reached out and expressed their support for DACA individuals and allowed students to, for the moment, maintain that status. However, it is a very shaky status. It has created a lot of fear with the students that we're working with. And it's important to make sure that we stay the most up to date with the information that we do. The places that I go to is the National Immigration Lawyers Center, the ILRC, which is the Immigrant Law Resource Center, and E4FC, those websites that are on the bottom. We do a lot of work to try to stay as up to date as we can so that you as educators and individuals and students can get the information that we need. For now, we're really encouraging that current recipients should renew if it's possible, because we don't know if the program were to go away. There has been talk that those DACA permits, which give work authorization, might just be allowed to expire as opposed to having them bring them in. So we want students to renew if they can. New applicants should apply after legal consultation because the program has not gone away. We're not saying that they should, but they should consider it and speak to legal consultation, although we are encouraging people not to participate in advanced parole, which is the opportunity that allows individuals to travel overseas that have DACA authorization. And while I think it's so important that so many individuals did fight for DACA, it's also important to remember that there are if there's 750,000 DACA recipients, there's 11 to 12 million undocumented individuals, so wanting to make sure that there's a solution that can encounter for all. I think that is also really important, especially for the states that offer in-state tuition based on DACA. These are the states that are offering in-state tuition. There's also many new scholarships that are DACA-based. Once DACA came, I think a lot more people felt comfortable moving forward and saying, okay, if someone has DACA, we can award them the status, but how can we ensure that those who are already in their educational career would not have that taken away, or what could we do to fight to ensure that those students would have the ability to be able to continue their college and have the financial resources to be able to do so. I think it's just important to give a general sense in terms of how many states have in-state tuition. There's 16 states have in-state tuition by legislation. There's another 4 states that have specific higher education institutions within their schools, within their states that actually offer in-state tuition. But there are 6 states that ban in-state tuition for unauthorized migrants, and I'm worried that this list might grow. So I think the work is for all of us, especially for those of us who are across the nation in different states, to continue to advocate for the opportunity for students to be able to attend school, or for the in-state tuition where it is currently to not be taken away. And there's many student organizations as well as educator organizations who are already advocating for this in their states. So you could connect with them if these are one of your states. There are 6 states that offer financial aid for undocumented students, California being one of them, and Minnesota, New Mexico, Oregon. But if there's 6 states, that's 46 states that do not. And so also making sure that we're aware of how to help students pay for schools through scholarships or other areas. If you are California, Educators for Fair Consideration has this chart which really talks about some of the legislation that offers in-state tuition here in California, as well as what the California DREAM Act does, and contrasts it with DACA, because in California there's been a lot of confusion around if you need DACA to be, or in other states as well, is DACA the key that actually gives you in-state tuition or gives you state financial aid? In California, they're completely separate. But for other states, it's important to perhaps use this as a model if you don't already have this kind of information set, to see how can you make sure that those will be, that everybody knows the law and is able to understand the law well. And if you get a better understanding about the specifics of the laws that are all in your state, ULEAD Network is an amazing resource at uleadnet.org, and that's through the National Forum for Public Good on Higher Education. They have a map. When you actually look at the map and you put your mouse over the different map, it'll tell you the state by state what the policies are. So this talks about the Massachusetts policy, but I got by random, all of the different have the most up-to-date information that they have. And I think this is a great resource for us as educators to be able to make sure that we're on point in terms of knowing what support and protections are there for our students and for this specifically is around education, so for the students and the prospective students that we serve. Also, just wanting to give a big shout out for scholarships in terms of, for those of you that are not aware, 4FC has a scholarship list that we update each year, both for the undergraduate and graduate level, that can help students identify scholarships that are available, as well as any school-specific scholarships you might have or community-based organizations that are there. Let me just check the time really quick. And wanting to see also encouraging people to start scholarships. I know at our university we started a scholarship just with a couple of individuals and were able to get payroll deductions, and then people did different fundraisers, and we went from giving 4 scholarships on our first year of $300 to last year we gave 10 scholarships of $800. So encouraging you guys also to think of that, because financial concerns and constraints really are one of the biggest issues, apart from the immigration concerns that students are carrying in terms of being able to attend and continue in their studies and graduate. For students,
Nancy, we've lost you again.
Sanctuary status, but
Nancy, are you
I think
having...
the most important message of supporting undocumented students is to let them know that we're in this together. And for those of you who have this image, which was created by an undocumented woman who works with E4FC, you can download this on our website and just put it up. I do think it's important for all of us to have visible symbols within our offices, our classrooms, our departments that let students know that we are there and we support them. And if you're in terms of more specific ways to support undocumented students, we created this top 10 ways to support undocumented students. Most importantly, I think it really is engaging with an open mind and trying to create a safe space. And when I say engage with an open mind, part of that also is the idea that immigration is actually a very broad issue, and individuals come from all across the world. In the news, undocumented has often been equated with Latino, or more specifically with people who come from Mexico or Latin America, and just remembering that there are people who are coming from Europe, from Africa, from Southeast Asia, from Asia, and so that we never know exactly who might be undocumented, who's in front of us. Learning about legislation, building the educator network like you already have through the Anthropologist Action Network, I think is great. And then how can we try to identify and connect students with more of their role models and build agency and power in their work. Excuse me, we also created What Can We Do Now for Educators, a post-election educator guide. Within this, there's all kinds of information that talks about sanctuary cities, information about legal resources, care for yourself, care for students. The letter that Greg mentioned in terms of the Pomona College letter is also in there. There's lots of information about sanctuary schools and the hundreds of schools that have signed that. You can get that in there as well. But we really all try to give information that would be on an individual level. I individually do. What can we as a group of people do in terms of such as the network that you're a part of? And also, how can we take that work to our institutions and make that more comprehensive? So some of the sanctuary protections or protections that can be put in place, safe zone protections that can be put in place, or actually be institutionalized. So it isn't cognizant of just one individual to make sure that we're doing that work. And also, on an institutional level, how do more trainings? Can you take some of this knowledge that you have and do trainings on your schools? Can you look at the institutional practices that your school already has, not just around sanctuary and sharing of information, but also around how do you give out the information that you have? Are our students aware of the supports that are already available? And then do you offer your support and make it visible with students and their families? And then also we put information in there about how can you as an educator also try to get the support that you need in terms of connecting with other educators, knowing the law, and really practicing some areas of self-care. I think this is very important, especially because this is not a sprint that we're going to be able to be running. We really need to look at it. This is a long view, more as a marathon. Because what we'd like is for all of our schools actually to be undocumented friendly schools that are inviting public about their support and actually invest resources in their students. And if we do that, we're not at that level yet where we can actually have our schools do that. How can our classrooms be inviting? How can our how can the departments that we work with be undocu-friendly and make that more visible? And then I know Greg went into a lot about the sanctuary and safe zone movement. We have specific questions. We recently created a new guide for educators, understanding the sanctuary safe zone movement, which gives some of the historical and basis about this and talks about how universities can actually protect undocumented students. It talks about some of the legal basis and gives you some of the different pieces of the Constitution, the 10th Amendment, the 14th Amendment. It talks a little bit more about purpose. So this could be really helpful, and we give specific examples about how we want you to make sure that schools are going for these 4 protections. And we, as well as Greg, our interest is not so much that educators use the term sanctuary, but that students are actually have these 4 protections in place and that they're aware of protections. And the way that you can do this is actually ensuring that students are protected and that there are policy guidelines. If a resolution has already been passed within your school, does that mean the registrar already knows what the procedures would be if face were to come up and flat badge? Have your institutional policies, and then also making sure that your support is visible. So I know I'm some time. I just want to show a couple more resources available. We have an Undocu College Guide and Equity tool, which really has an institutional focus and identifies some of the statewide challenges, as well as identifying best practices that colleges in California have been doing. And it also provides an equity tool that allows schools to get a structure that would foster campus conversations that would strengthen institutional practices. I also want to give a shout out to United We Dream, which is a great organization. It's the largest youth-led organization of immigrants in the United States, who also put out a national institutions coming out date kit. And they have a national focus. There's many examples at school. I'd encourage you to check them out. And just encourage you to wave your flag. E4SC has a poster in terms of undocumented students can go to college. On the right, this is a poster that was created by a student at San Francisco State. So what could you do at your school to make this message stronger? And how can you strengthen the support network that you already have? So I'm going to give you my contact information if you have specific questions that you'd like to follow up with me on. And as I'm going to pass this over now to the next presenter and want to have the next presenter and then pass this on so that you can contact me later with questions of the information.
Great, thanks, Nancy. So you can actually pass the presenter role back to me.
Okay, and that is done. Bye. I have people that are, asking to join. I guess I'm allowing them to join. Do I need to ask
Yeah, go ahead and let them join.
Sorry, I was not aware of all that. There's a bunch of people that are wanting to join. Now I can go to the presenter role, pass the presenter role to... Can I pass it to the Anthrop? Yes. Thank you. Sorry for my technical difficulties, everyone.
Lauren, if you want to pass the presenter role to me, I can put the slides back on. But if you have specific slides you'd like to show,
No, please take the presenter role. Let me see.
Great, so I believe the next presenter will be Kristen. And just a reminder for all attendees, please have your mics muted if you are not Kristen.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. Kristen, we are ready when you are.
You know, why don't we move on to Whitney while Kristen figures out her Wi-Fi, if that's okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Nancy, we're going to have you pass the presenter role back to the AAA. We can see your screen now.
Perfect.
So I can just get started while we're getting
Yeah.
back to the slides. Okay. So I'm Whitney Duncan from the University of Northern Colorado. And I just wanted to give a brief account of what some of our organizing activities on our campus have been, and some of the context and challenges and successes that we've had. So the school is in a very politically conservative town and county, so Greeley I don't need that slide quite yet, Greeley in Weld County, Colorado, and that's a community where there was a huge ICE raid on the Swift meatpacking plant in 2006 that essentially terrorized the immigrant community and its supporters. Many were deported, including the parents of students at the university, so there's this community and institutional memory of this horrible experience. And give me a shout out in the chat box if you can't hear me okay. I'm gonna forge ahead, assuming that you can. Another important contextual tidbit in the context of my university is that just before the 2016 election, on Trump's request, the university hosted a Trump rally. And I believe that really contributed to many students' fears, and not just immigrant students, about the university administration's positions and commitment to protecting vulnerable campus community members. There were multiple reports from the rally and on campus in the weeks after of hate speech and other problems. So this was very disturbing, and in the days after the election, I contacted colleagues who I thought might be similarly concerned and interested in joining together to push forward campus protections for marginalized students prior to Trump's inauguration. So word spread that I was contacting people, and about 40 faculty and staff members attended our first event and expressed a very strong interest in creating a task force. So we had a really broad range of concerns, and not just about immigrant students, but decided to focus our efforts on a sanctuary petition, really not knowing what the response to that would be, but feeling committed to putting in place some form of protection for immigrant students. So 4 of us collaboratively drafted that petition and then circulated to the rest of the group for feedback, and then to the university community. Again, we did not know what the reaction would be, but we got over 1,000 signatures in just a few days. So from my perspective, the work in the task force has been really enriching and inspiring. People who have worked at the university for decades have said they've never seen such mobilization on the part of so many faculty. So I think just from that perspective, forming task forces, advisory committees, working groups of faculty who are working across disciplines at different stages in their careers is extremely important, and including staff, so not just faculty. So folks who run cultural centers and other staff can be really on the front lines of dealing with students, and I think their participation has been really important. I think at least one person's not muted. I'm hearing coughing, so if you wouldn't mind muting. So after the petition, which got a fairly broad support, the university president sent out several campus-wide communications stating that she supported the spirit of the petition, which was great, and that she valued our dreamers. So she satisfied some of our requests by passing a resolution with the Board of Trustees that publicly stated support for DACA and for Colorado's asset bill, which makes undocumented students eligible for in-state tuition. She also signed the Pomona University Administrator's petition that I believe both Greg and Nancy mentioned. These were very welcome developments, but despite the faculty and staff support around these issues, we haven't gotten much further than this. We held an immigration informational attorneys and other members of the school administration, like the Dean of Students. We had turnout, and the event made clear that the campus community has lots of questions and concerns around these issues. I've not gotten any assurance about specific protections for DACA or undocumented students. So like other administrators, the university president views sanctuary as a problematic term with no agreed upon meaning, and negative attention to the university that would put a target on our students' backs, as she put it. The university's the president's husband, as a side note, is actually the mayor of Greeley, the town that the university is in. And at a recent city council meeting, he lashed out at a Latina councilwoman who proposed a resolution to make Greeley a sanctuary city. So we have that against us as well. So of course, as I think Greg did a great job pointing out, no university can guarantee protection, and sanctuary is, an unclear term in many ways. But it seems at this point, an asset and perhaps creating a website with immigration-related information is about as far as our administration is going to go in terms of supporting our efforts. So we were denied when we requested specific legal counsel for undocumented immigrant students, basically denied the possibility of safe spaces. So we're going to still be working on these things. And at the same time, it's important to note that there's been a very different reaction to the travel bans. So we have a fairly large refugee community in Greeley and international student population. And there was immediate mobilization administratively around helping to support those students who might be affected by the travel ban. So I think that really drives home how entrenched ideas of deservingness are for different groups of immigrants. So perhaps needless to say, none of this is very comforting to our DACA and undocumented students, but we, faculty and staff on the task force, are still extremely committed to finding ways of creating a safe learning environment for these students and helping to support their families as well. So I have a slide with resources, but maybe I should let Kristen present about her experience now that she's back with us, and we can go to those references at the very end of Kristen's presentation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Whitney. So Kristen, are you able to hear us well now?
Yes, I might have some feedback.
Yeah, so just make sure your laptop is muted so that we're only picking you up on your cell phone.
Can you hear me?
Perfect.
Okay, hopefully this will work, and I'm sorry about that before. Can you go back up 2 slides, please?
Of course.
Okay, so like Whitney, I just wanted to give a brief overview of what has been going on here at the University of Oregon. And first of all, I just wanted to thank the AAA for supporting this webinar, and also to all the presenters for all the helpful information, and for all of you for being online and caring about this issue. So like Lauren said at the beginning, in the immediate aftermath of the election, we developed a Facebook group called Protecting Undocumented Students. The membership of that group started at about a dozen of us. Some of us are on the call right now. And within a week, there were hundreds, and now there's 2,000 plus members of that group. That group has been incredibly useful. It's the first time myself I've used Facebook in sort of an organizing way, but that group has been incredibly useful for information sharing. In particular, we at the University of Oregon, right after the election, wanted to work towards passing a resolution around sanctuary. And on the Facebook group, other members of the group were developing a shared Google document, which was keeping a list of U.S.-wide campus and university sanctuary petitions. And it was using that Google document that I and 5 colleagues here at the University of Oregon drafted our own sanctuary petition, which we took to the floor of the UO Faculty Senate, and which was passed unanimously on the 15th of November. 2016, so about 2 weeks after the election. So I was one of 5 co-sponsors of the Faculty Senate. The Senate was basically asking the University of Oregon administration to do a number of things, and I won't read them all, but we asked the administration to make the UOO a sanctuary campus, to protect student privacy by restricting the release of information to ICE, to instruct campus police to refrain from collaborating with ICE, and to refuse access to campus to federal immigration officials for the purposes of immigration enforcement, and a number of other things related to support for students. So that Senate resolution passed on the 15th of November, and on the 16th of November, UO President Michael Schill issued his own statement. He did not use, the president's office did not use sanctuary language. but basically made those 3 points that Nancy had up on a screen or a slide earlier, which were, one, that the University of Oregon would not allow immigration enforcement activity on our campus without a warrant. 2, that the UO Police Department will not act on behalf of federal officials in enforcing immigration law. And 3, that the UO will not share with federal government any information on immigration status of students. So this all happened back in November. I just wanted to point out that there was pushback around these issues because I was one of 5 faculty co-sponsors on our Faculty Senate resolution. I and a number of my colleagues received hate email from the organized sort of white nationalist right here in Oregon. Some of that email was just discriminatory and hateful, but others of it was saying that, the youth, we were putting our students at risk, that we were going to lose federal funding, and that we were providing a false sense of security to our students, or that these declarations weren't meaningful to them. So I'm saying that because I think it's important to acknowledge the resistance to this kind of organizing and the fact that that resistance is organized, and when these things become public, like in our local newspaper coverage of these issues on campus, the organized alt-right in the state kind of is organized and responding. And I just think it's important for us as we organize on our campuses to be ready for that and to know how we're going to respond to it, especially working alongside our students so we don't put anyone at greater risk. I would also just say that there is a Dreamers working group here at the University of Oregon. We've been active as a group through the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for a number of years, but in the aftermath of the election, we became reactivated. A couple of the things we're doing on campus are providing student support, outreach, and we're doing informational presentations. We're not calling them ally trainings because our view is an on-docu ally training is sort of a longer presentation, and we don't have the time for that right now, but we're planning on doing that in the future. But these informational presentations, we're sort of taking them around campus to staff, faculty, different departments and units, including the College of Arts and Sciences department head meeting, and we're just going over basic information about who are undocumented students, what is DACA, what are the risks and obstacles that these students face, what is Oregon's tuition equity law, what scholarships are available to these students, and also resources on campus for these students. So just giving faculty and staff tools to be able to, if not be undocu allies in full name and sort of purpose, at least refer students, at least A, acknowledge that these students are here, and B, help refer them to appropriate services. I think the other thing I wanted to mention was that the students simultaneously at the University of Oregon have been mobilizing, and I think that it's important to recognize, as some of the students participating in our AAA roundtable last November pointed out, that students are going to be different at different states of wanting to be politically involved on these issues. And I think as a faculty ally, I've been trying to be really recognizing that students are at different states of the process in terms of being sort of out about their status and out about wanting to be active on campus. That said, I would just say that in the last couple of weeks, with student activism, including the UO Machistas, the issues around sanctuary on and off campus here in the Eugene and Lane County community have really been revitalized. So a number of us on campus were involved in pushing to make Eugene a sanctuary city and Lane County a sanctuary county, in addition to making the Eugene Public School K-12 school district a sanctuary school district. That has not yet happened, but just Monday night, the Eugene City Council did declare not a sanctuary city resolution, but something along those lines, making the same points about not sharing information and not collaborating with federal immigration enforcement. And I just wanted to point that out because we began that organizing at the city and county level in November, but it wasn't until there was a real alliance built with the Latinx community here in Eugene and Lane County and with student involvement in organizing that I think the city finally responded. So it's been great, but also challenging to kind of work with students and figure out what that appropriate role is. Finally, I just want to say that on campus, our organizing has resulted in a number of concrete things. In addition to the UO president's message back in November, the president's office in February of this year, announced a new vice provost level position for undocumented and immigrant students. So that was sort of a follow-up to the Faculty Senate resolution that was making a demand on the administration to provide more visible support and points of contact. And the fact that that position was made at the vice provost level, I think, is significant. So I'm not sure what lessons we can learn. I mean, I'm just feeling like I'm in the midst of this learning with everyone, learning from Nancy, learning from Greg, and learning with all of you. But talking to Whitney about some of the differences has been really useful for me. Just thinking about the broader structural context in which campus organizing takes place. Obviously, Oregon, we have a supportive governor and state legislature, and I think that matters in terms of how the president of the University of Oregon is able to take certain stands or not, and the ability for us to organize here on and off campus. So I think I'll just end with that and thank all of you for being on this call today.
Laurel, can you move to the final slide of the presentation? And Whitney, do you want to present some of those resources briefly before we go to Q&A?
Sure. So I think most people are probably aware of most of these, but I just wanted to put up again the websites of the American Immigration Lawyers Association. We heard from Greg Chen from there, and thank you so much to Greg, and Educators for Fair Consideration. Thank you to Nancy. So here are their websites at the top two. United Green also, and I believe Nancy's presentation mentioned their resources as well. They have a Here to Stay toolkit for educators. So in addition to the excellent resources that Nancy shared, that might be one to take a look at. We've also mentioned our quote unquote secret Facebook group, not so secret, Protecting Undocumented Students. I think the easiest way to join, if you don't know someone who is a member, is to send one of us the email address associated with your Facebook account. And I believe that I can add you that way, or any of us can add you that way. For Anthropologists, we hope you'll consider joining the Anthropologist Action Network for Immigrants and Refugees. You can search for it on groups.google.com. And some of us have submitted for an executive session at the American Anthropological Association meetings in, sorry, that's supposed to say 2017, not 2016. And whether it's an executive session or not, we hope to have a session dealing with some of these issues and hearing from folks across the country at different types of campuses. So stay tuned for that. And thank you again to the American Anthropological Association for hosting. And I think we can take questions now if people want to put those in the chat box. And thanks to everyone.
Thank you. Also, yes, a reminder to type your questions into the chat box. And if you are not one of the presenters, please make sure you have your mics muted during the Q&A session. So all of the resources presented in today's webinar will be available on our website at americananthro.org/webinars. And all of the links will also be put up there. So if you or anyone else you know was not able to attend, or you wanted to rewatch the webinar, the recording will be also available on that website. If you are also interested in learning more about AANIR, feel free to put your email address in the chat box. And if you are also interested in learning about AAA's World on the Move educational project, feel free to also put your email in the chat box, and we will make sure to connect you with the right people. Right, so Kristen has a question. She wants to know of Nancy. It seems that there is a debate around using the language of sanctuary. Some say it lacks legal definition, but it has power as a social movement tool. And what is E4FC's position on sanctuary language now?
I don't know how old it is.
So Nancy, if you're still on the line.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. Do I have to accept it? Can I just talk?
You're able to just talk.
Great. So E4FC, it's not that we have a specific position, but you'll see through the Sanctuary and Safe Zone guide that we created that we explain some of the different positions of both. It is true that sanctuary the sanctuary movement, as Greg explained, has a long historical history and brings a lot of, I think, strength to a quick idea of what that means or a general idea of what that definition could mean. The problem is that as different sanctuary resolutions have passed or safe zone resolutions have passed, they all have different elements that are part of it. So I think some of the concerns that can be with sanctuary movement is it isn't really a shield in the way that it was used historically more in the 1980s. And so coming up, you don't want, we think that it's really important for each school to ensure that that the safeties and protections that are put in place are clearly defined and communicated to their student population so that they are able to have a solid idea of what kinds of protections could be had and where they could be. Because we don't want to, I think some of the schools, as Greg was speaking and as the executive order points out, that there has been concern that if schools are identified as sanctuary schools, that federal grant monies or other monies could be taken away. But then there's others who say that there are legal protections or legal fights and battles that would take place in court that would prevent that from happening. So the university doesn't have a position. We're speaking mostly of the sanctuary and safe zone movement, and what we're really advocating for is that universities put protections in place that will handle those four elements of limiting access to student data and information, limiting collaboration with the police, that police does not collaborate with ICE, and that there's information and resources available to the students. And for us, once those protections are in place, it's really also important that policy guidelines are put in place that will actually make those enforceable and understandable to the staff and faculty that work there and the students that are going to be under these concerns. And so I would encourage you to look at our sanctuary and safe zone guide movement guide if you have more specific questions to how the elements of that question.
Great. So we have a question from Aaron. And I believe it's for Whitney. And I'm getting feedback on the line, so if everybody except for Whitney could mute their mic, that'd be great. So Aaron's question, in addition to the Pomona College statement, does anyone know of examples of policy statements that K through 12 districts have issued?
So I'm hoping other people will jump in here because I've been less, the Pomona College statement was, I believe, just for university administrators, so maybe K through 12 administrators were signees as well. I know that in my local context, the Denver Public School District has issued statements and specific policies around protecting undocumented students. And I've heard of other just local school districts doing the same. So I can look and try to find Denver's and make that available to AANIR members. Does anyone else have knowledge of K through 12 districts that have issued statements? I don't know if people kind of have to answer that question if we want that. Well, unmuting themselves or just through the chat box. I see that Kristen posts, check out the United We Dream website on the slide too, because there's lots of K through 12 resources. So that's a great thing to check out.
Yeah, I think they would be a great resource to have more information. They might. I haven't found a central listing of K through 12 schools. I did hear though that within California there were 40 districts already that had some kind of protections for undocumented students, and that there were 40 colleges and universities who had done so well. And that in San, I believe that Los Angeles Unified School District is one of them, and San Francisco already has one protection base and a number of undocumented students and faculty or teachers at June Jordan High School are putting forward a resolution here. So if you email me, Nancy, I might be able to connect you with the names or parties of others who are doing that.
Great. So we have a question from Madeline. What are some recommended steps if one of our students or their family members is arrested? And I believe this is a question to the entire panel. So whoever would like to chime in, feel free.
This is Lauren. You know, one of the things that we're trying to do both on our campus and in our larger Long Beach community is to have trainings addressing exactly that question around preparedness for families. I think certainly partnering with local nonprofits that are legal assistance organizations that are doing Know Your Rights presentations. They've been advising families to have a deportation plan, so custody documents, school documents, copies of passports, things that are put online that you can access if in fact you're deported. Certainly connecting with organizations like United We Dream in terms of the rapid response network. You know, certainly putting pressure on ICE to release people has been effective in the past. It's been interesting to see it continue to work in some regards right now. You know, I think particularly for students, if you're talking about high school students or younger students, really, you know, I think having the difficult conversations with families around having those types of custody arrangements. I've definitely seen in my own research where families are torn apart and parents who are in, you know, in my case, deported to Mexico and Guatemala lose custody of their children, or at least have a very difficult time regaining custody transnationally. I actually posted a link in the chat box, a recent NPR piece that was looking at one particular LA school that is the K through 12 that is talking to families about preparedness. And these, you know, of course, are very difficult conversations to have. But in the K through 12 context, working with school administrators is going to be really useful to be proactive with families in the worst case scenario that young people are or their parents are picked up.
I would jump in. This is also very local, but different state immigrant advocacy organizations can have different hotlines or initiatives to help support people who are in deportation proceedings. So in Colorado, there are multiple hotlines, but one that I'm involved in, people are trained as documenters of deportation cases, as well as just general interactions that people have with ICE and with law enforcement to really get a database of how these enforcement activities are operating and whether they're operating legally, that can then help immigration advocacy organizations advocate for legislation. So that type of information and documentation is how immigration advocacy folks eventually got the the driver's license bill passed in Colorado for undocumented immigrants. So, and at this point, they're doing a big initiative to spread word about this hotline. So if anyone has interactions with ICE, they call the hotline and they'll be set up with a volunteer who will both document their case and accompany them and help provide resources if they're in deportation proceedings. So you might look at whatever immigrant organizations, immigrant advocacy organizations are doing in your local setting.
Great. So if we have answered that question, we have one more question from Nora. She says, my campus is located in a county that has a 287G agreement. Does anyone know of a resource that can help us understand the legal obligations campus police have to city or county police? And this is a question to the entire panel.
I'm not sure if Nancy's still on the line.
I'm still on the line. I don't have specific, we could look into that, but I don't have specific information about what is required. I think that would probably be a better question directed to Greg in terms of what the legal requirements are for the police to collaborate with ICE enforcement. I do know that different, so I don't have specific, I don't have a specific answer to that question.
This is one of the National Immigrant Justice Center, which is based in Chicago, has enforcement. I'll see if I can find it during the length of this call, but if not, I can follow up with you. I can email you.
I also
Lauren, we're
think
getting
that
lots of
potentially
feedback.
one, I might be able to, if you email me, Nancy, at E4FC, I think that there are some organizations through the National Immigration Law Center that would have better information on that. So I might be able to connect you to one of my colleagues. I just don't have that information specifically. But National Immigration Law Center might be a good one, and I could send you specifically to a lawyer if you send me your email.
Can you hear me? This is Kristen.
Kristen, we can hear you.
Okay, I just wanted to also add into that part of the discussion that one thing we in the Dreamers Working Group at the University of Oregon have found incredibly useful is just reaching out to the campus police department. And we had a meeting with the chief of police last fall and just asked him what his stance was, and he was incredible. He was incredibly supportive, and in response to our sort of question and the President Schill's message on not collaborating with enforcement actions on campus, he recorded and made very public a statement in Spanish and English on the UOPD website saying that the University of Oregon Police is committed to all student safety, and this is a community, and we're here for you, and we won't ask about your immigration status. So I think what both Nancy and Greg were saying earlier about just reaching out to campus police and beginning a conversation with them can be really, really useful. And so maybe in response to the 287G question, maybe the campus police will tell you something that might surprise you. That would be nice, but I think that would be a good place to start.
Okay, so we have about another 25 minutes or so. If we have any other questions, feel free to put them into the chat box.
I would just like to second what Kristen said. This is Nancy, I was doing a presentation at the College of Marin, which is a community college here in near San Francisco. And the police officer came into the presentation, and I was a little bit nervous. He came in actually to state that he as well felt that, they needed to follow the law in terms of the CVIS to be taking place, and that they, of course, if there's any specific hot pursuit, that they would not prevent that kind of activity, but that they were not going to be using their own enforcement activities to do that. And I think it's great what Kristen said in terms of actually having the police officers speaking about that, or just getting a better understanding of how this really can protect the safety of all students by speaking, and allowing the students to know that the position of the department, one way or the other, because I think we don't want to raise alarm, but I also think it's important for us to have a better understanding of what our students might be facing, and therefore building in contingency plans or protections or support network that might take place on campus that could respond directly if the response is not favorable.
Are there any final questions? Well, if not, thank you everybody for attending. We really appreciate your collaboration, your participation. We know everybody's quite busy, so thanks to Nancy and Greg and Kristen and Whitney as well. We will put the webinar up online on the American Anthropological Association's website. So you can certainly circulate it to your colleagues at universities. If you do have any questions or follow-up concerns, please feel free to contact any of us. We will do our best to put you in contact with the appropriate source, and we do encourage you to join the Facebook group. And if you're an anthropologist, to join the Anthropologist Google group. These are really incredible resources to us as we organize on our different campuses. So thanks to the AAA as well for offering us the technology to do this. And I hope everybody has a great day.
And just a final reminder that if you want more information about AANIR or AAA's World on the Move project, just include your email in the chat inbox, and we will get you connected to the right folks. So with that, I'm going to end the recording right now, and I'll stay online for just a little bit longer in case anybody has any last comments or questions. I will be able to answer them in the chat box. But thank you everyone for attending and for all the thoughtful discussion, and have a great rest of your day.